Welcome to For Mature Audiences Only, presented by Archer Law Office, the podcast where we have honest, real-world conversations about aging, caregiving, elder law, and how families can navigate some of life's most overwhelming moments with clarity and confidence.
If you're caring for aging parents, worried about long-term care costs, confused about Medicaid, VA benefits, or estate planning, or you've suddenly found yourself in a caregiving crisis, this show is for you. I'm Mary Shapiro, and I'm joined by my co-host,
Shannon Johnson.
We're senior resource specialists with Archer Law Office, working side by side with families every day to help them navigate the legal and practical challenges of aging.
Today, we're joined by Archer Law Office's founding and managing partner, Carl Archer. In this episode, we will be breaking down what elder law actually means, the biggest mistakes families make in a caregiving crisis, why powers of attorney and healthcare proxies matter more than wills, how families really pay for long-term care, and how to protect your family, your home, and most importantly, your sanity.
This is For Mature Audiences Only, presented by Archer Law Office. Let's get started.
Today, we are joined by our fearless leader,
Woohoo!
an avid Met fan, big traveler, dog lover, certified elder law attorney, and managing attorney for Archer Law Office. Carl Archer focuses on Medicaid, veterans benefits, guardianships, and estate planning. He has been named to New Jersey Super Lawyers every year since 2012. A Rutgers graduate, Carl is the leading advocate for caregivers and older adults across New Jersey and New York.
Also known as Atticus's dad. Welcome, Carl.
Flattery will get you everywhere, my friend. I'm doing just fine. How are you?
I'm doing well, Mary. How are you today?
I'm good. Happy to have our fearless leader.
Absolutely. So, all jokes aside, we're very excited to be doing this podcast and to have you as our first guest. So we're going to really dive right into, all things elder law and try to share as much information with our community as we can. So let's start off with something easy for you, Carl. If you could put into words what exactly an elder law attorney does, what would you say?
So the way that I tend to describe it to people is that an elder law attorney's job is to focus on actually the needs of the caregiver. The people that come to talk to us and the people that are our clients are the family members of the loved one, of the person who needs care. And we are attending to that person in a way that allows them to do the thing that nobody else can do. It's very easy to find, comparatively easy, I guess, to find an aide or a bookkeeper or an accountant or a lawyer for that matter. But, it's not easy to replace a brother or a sister or a parent or a child. And those are the roles that we want to give back. That's what we're trying to accomplish.
I love that. I love letting the family members be the family members again.
So I have to ask you, Carl, was there anything that inspired you to specifically pursue this sort of practice? What really brought you to it? Was there some sort of personal experience that brought you to this point? How did you come to start Archer Law Office?
Well, that's probably enough material for a podcast right there, but I'll give you the short version. So, I was a caregiver relatively early in my life. My dad passed away when I was 18. So just as a high school student, taking him back and forth to doctor's appointments, trying to care for him through a journey with lung cancer and seeing how that affected my family and how that affected me. I knew that I kind of wanted to have something to do to help that population if I could somehow. My dad was also a veteran. My dad started an American Legion post up where we grew up. And so if there was a way for me to give back to that population, I was going to do that too. But I didn't know how to fit those things together. And so I did what everybody does. They go to law school, you take a bunch of classes, you meet other lawyers, you do job interviews, and through a combination of good luck and circumstance, I found myself in the office of an elder law attorney. And at some point, I realized that there was a way to use that practice to touch all of the things that had kind of formed me and what I thought my purpose was. And I let that become my why, if you will. And that's what's helped guide the firm as we've all kind of created it together.
Would you say that attorney was like a mentor for the elder law, or just your introduction to elder law?
You know, in a sense, everybody that you meet teaches you something. You know, I think that sometimes they teach you how to do things, and sometimes they teach you how not to do things. But
Good point.
I learn a lot from a lot of different people, and I'm grateful to all the people that I've been able to talk to through the years to get a sense of how we do this best for people. And incidentally, most of the people that I've learned the most from are not lawyers.
I have a follow-up question to the caregiving about your father aspect of it. During that time, did you guys seek someone like yourself to kind of help you guys navigate the process of caregiving for him?
It wasn't really that kind of a situation. Like this practice, the practice that I'm involved in that we're talking about, deals with a lot of chronic illness, deals with care that oftentimes is outside the home, or when it's dealing with how to pay for care that's inside the home. So it's very expensive. It's over a period of time. My father's illness was a short-term illness. And so it didn't really work out that way. But I think that talking to somebody and getting a sense of what the options were would have reduced some of the uncertainty that my parents felt during that period of time. I mean, I was 17. I was only uncertain that I was going to get through high school, but I'm sure they had other questions.
But it gives you that perspective for our current clients, that you've sat in caregiver shoes and witnessed the benefit of doing what we do.
Certainly, and I would generalize that to say that practically every person that we've traveled this road with in our office, in one way or the other, has been a caregiver, and they all have that caregiver story. You know, at some point, you guys are going to speak with Lisa, who is my business partner and who has had at least as much a role in forming this law firm as I ever did. And she tells a wonderful story about her journey as a caregiver. And so to the extent that you ask her any questions, you got to ask her about that.
Definitely.
To piggyback off the caregiving, I kind of want to talk about the role that Mary and I have with the firm. So, we stated that we're senior resource specialists, but what I want to know is what made you implement our role into the firm, because it is unique to other elder firms around the state.
Yeah. So you're going to start to notice a theme. I can't take credit for this one either. Many years ago, Lisa and I met a guy named Tom Callahan, a dear, dear friend of ours. And he had an independent coaching and consulting business that dealt with seniors. And he did what he needed to do, but he didn't have the lawyer aspect of things. And we were trying to figure out how to be lawyers, and we didn't have the boots on the ground care aspect of things. And so Tom and I got to talking. More importantly, Tom and Lisa got to talking. Again, another interesting story. And the long and short of it is that Tom came in and started working with us, and Tom created that role and that department within the firm and created that job title and those responsibilities in a way that I haven't seen replicated effectively anywhere else. And you guys are the living proof of that.
No, I'm very grateful because it's an amazing and unique role, having other roles in healthcare in the past, to still be able to help folks work with healthcare, not be in healthcare, and come at it from this perspective.
I agree. The word unique is the word that I probably hear most often called when explaining it to people that maybe don't know what it is, especially other law firms, because they don't have a piece like this that we do, where we have a dedicated team established for our clients to kind of help them navigate the caregiving process.
Well, and there's the challenge. I mean, it's easy enough to be a lawyer and to know what the rules and the regulations and the documents and to do the thing that lawyers are trained to do. and it might be easy enough given the right exposure and the right experience and being out on in the field and talking to people and knowing what the ins and outs of the various care settings look like and knowing who the professionals are and making those contacts. It's really hard to do both of those things at the same time. And what's been really fun is how we've all figured out how to implement those things together so that we can bring people all the way through the struggle that they're having.
It's a very, very rewarding role, I should say. And to that, I'll ask you, we meet a lot of families when they are in crisis mode, and there's a lot of family emotions that go on there. What do you find most rewarding about the work that you do?
So I'm going to steal a line from Lisa. At the rate you're going, there's going to be no point in even talking to Lisa because I'm stealing all of her lines. But, the whole thing that I was talking about before about trying to let somebody be a family member again. When we do it right, people are able to go see their loved one and just be there.
Right.
And not be worried about 800 other things that have to get done because they figured out how to coordinate those resources in a way that they can get done what they need to do. And then they can just sit there and talk about their grandkids or about what the weather's like or anything they want. And they don't have to worry about, is this person getting the right care? Is it being paid for correctly? Am I going to lose my house? They don't have to worry about those things. Those things have been taken care of.
Right. They don't have to do the heavy lifting anymore.
No. And that's that's where good professional guidance comes in. It's just that in this kind of a setting, especially when you have a family in crisis, they wouldn't know good professional guidance, even if you put it right in front of them, because they're spinning too fast.
Bit of a loaded question here, but can you walk us through what happens when someone first comes to the firm to seek help? What kind of situations or issues do you typically see?
Gosh. Okay.
Where do you even begin?
So fundamentally, people don't see lawyers because everything's fine. People see lawyers because there's a problem. And so something I've picked up over the years is don't assume that people know what they're doing, what their problem is, but listen to them first and get a gist of what their problem actually is. And so if they say to you, well, I'm worried about mom because whatever reason, fine, we're focused on mom, but we need to figure out why. And it might be that we just are concerned that we can't act on her behalf. We might be concerned that she needs a lot of care and we don't know how to pay for it. Mm-hmm. We might be concerned that the place that she's at, she's not getting the care that she needs and they want to pursue some other option. I don't know. I mean, people come in and they hear about all sorts of things. And so, the important thing is to sit and listen. Answer questions first. Because it turns out if you answer questions first, you learn the things that you need to know. Because people will tell you what they're concerned about because they'll tell you what their questions are. And so from there, you just kind of go down that path and try and follow them to something that makes sense for them.
I think, too, it's also a chance where they can be heard and someone's actually really listening to them. And I don't, when I've seen our crisis families and they're spinning and nobody's really listening to their story, but when you sit down, take a time, and because you're seeing an attorney, you want to get out your story and you're focused on them and the listening aspect. I think people expect them to you're going to tell them what to do, but the fact that you're going to listen first and answer questions is a different perspective. I think that will make people stop, feel heard, and let you, like you said, get the information to how to help them.
Sure. And because it turns out that I don't have all the answers, but sometimes the answers suggest themselves. And Interestingly enough, most of the time people see the lawyer because they think the lawyer is the one in charge, or that the lawyer has some sort of authority or greater knowledge. And, well, we all know that isn't necessarily true. But the nice thing is that I at least have the retention. And so what I can do is I can direct traffic. And so I don't mind doing that, at least.
That's a great way to put it. What are some of the most common mistakes or biggest challenges you see families facing when they are dealing with an aging loved one?
So the biggest problem people have is that they find themselves unable to help in a time of crisis. And the most common reason that they have that problem is because they don't have decision-making documents in place, a power of attorney and a healthcare proxy. I get people come in all the time, I need a will. Sure you do. But the will only takes effect once you're gone. The power of attorney and the healthcare proxy are concerned with the things that are happening while you're alive, and all else equal, people care much more about what's going on while they're alive than once they're gone. And so when you do these documents, it's a little uncomfortable, because in order to do the documents, or in order to sit down and think about what you want them to say, you have to acknowledge that you are not immortal. And you have to acknowledge that at some point somebody might have to do something for you. And that's a little tough to do, which is why so many people don't do them.
Right.
But without them, your family can't help you if you're unable to help yourself. And what they end up doing is they end up coming to a lawyer, and the lawyer can fix those issues, but only at the cost of a lot more time and a lot more expense and a lot more inconvenience. And as much as I like to run a business, and it turns out it's helpful to make money. It also turns out that is never the right answer. The more expensive route is very rarely the right answer for people. And so I would be just tickled pink if everybody had a power of attorney and a healthcare proxy, so that somebody could step in and handle their financial and medical affairs.
And what happens if they don't? What's the route that is left to them if someone doesn't go?
Somebody's going to have to go to court. You know, there's a procedure called a guardianship that's the most common way of disposing of that sort of problem, but it takes 10 times as long and it costs 10 times as much. And that's great for those of us who are in the system, and it's really terrible for everybody else.
Right.
And so, again, it would be nice if that was not how this worked. But again, people don't like doing the thing that's hard. And I don't blame them, but doesn't mean we can't push them.
And, I think you're right about it. It's absolutely an uncomfortable conversation to have. And I think it's one that's necessary. When you're giving your estate presentations that I've been a part of, you said a line that I've now used myself, which is the documents are in place to prevent unforeseen circumstances. And that's just kind of the message that I always try and get out to folks when I'm either at a health fair or doing a talk somewhere, just to have that as a protection for yourself. Give yourself and your family some sort of peace of mind that in the event something does happen to us, which can happen to any of us at any time, any day, things are in place for your family to be able to navigate the situation as smoothly as possible versus having to go through a bunch of hurdles if they don't have those documents in place.
Yeah, that's
Right.
at its core, that's the answer.
Nobody wants to have to see an attorney in addition to a slew
Right.
of doctors and everything else that are to have the documents ready.
I generally don't get a lot of people who are happy to see me anyway.
Right. All right. Let's talk about some of the bigger concerns that families have when it comes to these things, like how to pay for care. What are some of the options out there for seniors who need help at home or in a nursing facility?
So there's the one that everybody knows about, nobody wants to use, which is what's in your pocket. Okay? Cash out of pocket. bank accounts, IRAs, retirement accounts, savings, sell your house. Nobody wants to use those options. I don't blame them. But that's the one
Everybody wants what they want.
And so, well, yeah, but so when you ask the question, what are the different ways that you could pay for long-term care? What you're really asking is, how can I pay for long-term care without using the money in my pocket?
Right. That's what everybody wants.
Exactly.
Because it turns out everybody wants long-term care at some point, whether it's at home or otherwise. They just don't want to go bankrupt. So, fair enough. So, things that can be useful but aren't necessarily. So a lot of times people think Medicare is very useful. And I mean, it's useful for a lot of things. You turn 65 and, under most circumstances, you can get on Medicare. It's beautiful. Medicare will cover subacute rehab after a hospital stay. And I'm leaving lots of details out. And so if you're listening to this and you're going to tell me all the things I left out, I know I did. Don't bother me. I understand. If Medicare is paying for the rehab, that's fine. But at the end of the rehab stay, it's short term. You're going home.
Right.
And that's it. And Medicare might pay for a little bit of help to transition you home. But after that, they're out of the game. They're paying for the hospitals. They're paying for the doctors. They're not paying for ongoing care. So it ends up being not as useful as people think it's going to be or hope it's going to be.
I always get the surprised, what do you mean Medicare doesn't pay for that when going over services?
All the time.
Do you think that, how can I phrase this? Do you think that the healthcare system has sort of failed the common folk that doesn't really know how to navigate this process? Or do you think it's more so on people to kind of do their own research and kind of be able to know what to do in these situations?
I think that is a question that is incapable of getting an actual answer, because the healthcare system is huge and has a lot of conflicting priorities. And it turns out that the people who are in it would like to make money, and they would like to provide care, and you would like to make sure that things are safe, and you would like to provide for maximum autonomy, and you would like to make sure that there's decision-making at all relevant points. And you want to make sure that doctors can make decisions and have their own autonomy when it comes to that. And it turns out that those things are all fundamentally a conflict with one another at one point or another. And that's to say nothing of access to medicine for poor and underserved communities and all of that. So, when you have a ship that's that big, it's hard to steer it.
Right.
And so by the same token, you get into this system and you have all these conflicting priorities, and you have people telling you things, and all of those things in theory might be true, but they're also conflicting. And if you're not a veteran of the healthcare system, you have no idea what actually applies to your circumstance.
Right.
So I don't know how you just do your research and come to some sort of reasoned conclusion. I mean, it's a 5-minute conversation that takes 10 years to have.
Right.
So even it's something like you talk about Medicare paying for care, people understand, that rehab, and they understand very limited care at home after a rehab stay. But there's so much nuance. And, well, why wouldn't Medicare pay for additional care? Well, there's good reasons for it to do so, and there's equally good reasons why it wouldn't. Well, why would we let the government take care of everything instead of letting people pay for it themselves? This is a discussion that is so far above my pay grade that I don't even bother to get into it. But the point is that there's lots of people who are way smarter than I am that have that whole conversation. If we're talking about additional ways to pay for long-term care, because I just got started with the Medicare thing, people can have long-term care insurance. It turns out about 2% of people have long-term care insurance, and the rest of people don't. Long-term care insurance is great if you can afford it. It's expensive.
Right.
It turns out so is long-term care.
Right.
But if you have it, it buys options. It buys time for you. But it's difficult. The state and federal government have a program called Medicaid. It's sometimes in the different states, it's called different things, but fundamentally it's Medicaid. And that will cover lots of things, but in my context is long-term care or care at home. The program is also ridiculously complicated. It is funded in all sorts of labyrinthine ways with the federal government. Their eligibility determinations are very difficult to predict with certainty. And the end result is that you get people like, the people that are recording today, okay, and people like me and people like Lisa, who in theory have better things to do with their time and might be able to actually help people. Instead, we spend our time fighting with people in the government to get people health care that everybody agrees is objectively good for them. And that whole thing becomes a big fight, and it becomes a source of confusion. And so, is that because the system's broken? Is that because people aren't informed? It's because it's a big boat and it's hard to steer. That's really essentially what it works out to.
Is it getting more complicated, like you just said, to kind of make sure people are having things done right by them than it's ever been before?
I've probably been in the space about 15 years, and it's certainly not getting less complicated. But, people are trying new things. And it turns out the system gets more complicated because people's lives get more complicated. And people's care gets more complicated. And medical technology gets more complicated. So there's always going to be things that move and change. And then there's less optimistic reasons why things change. But I was sworn not to talk about political developments or the way that the government runs things before I came on this podcast under penalty of death. So I'm just not going to do it. I'm just going to say things got more complicated, and I'll leave it at that.
That's probably smart. That's a good answer.
You spoke earlier about how your father was a veteran. I know how important that is to you. Can you just touch on what kind of benefits are available through the VA?
So I'll tell you what, I'm going to answer a different question than you asked, because the VA isn't the end of the government benefits question for people who served. The funny part of it is that there's lots of things that are available through the federal VA. There's also things that are available through state veterans programs and county veterans programs and local nonprofit organizations that serve the veteran population, and private businesses that, for whatever reason, want to give incentives to veterans and provide discounts. So you can get benefits in 100 different places. Anything from I got a free lunch at the Elks Club on Thursday to I get a 10 or 15% discount because I show my veterans card at insert one of your fine retailers that are not sponsoring this podcast, to I'm applying for veterans benefits through TRICARE. That's the veterans healthcare system, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that, and for by and large, what you need to do to get those benefits is that you need to have served. You need to be active duty generally. Sometimes service in the reserves or the National Guard is fine.
Okay.
But the definitions are always different. And I don't think anybody who served in the National Guard or the reserves and calls themselves a veteran would get any disagreement. That wouldn't get any disagreement from me. But the words are always redefined in certain places. Sometimes you have to have served during a period of wartime to be a veteran.
Right.
But if, under a program like that, you can get a pension benefit where you could get, $1,300, $1,400, $1,500 or more, could sometimes a lot more per month, even though whatever medical issues you're having are not related to your wartime service. You could have been a baker on an aircraft carrier, and it doesn't matter. You're baking bread, and now you have Parkinson's disease, but you're still going to get the benefit. So there's a lot of different benefits, but the key thing is that it's like weaving a basket. You just need a lot of strands. You need to just kind of find a bunch of programs and weave them all together and come up with something that'll hold weight.
That sounds good. I love this question. When should families start planning?
Mm-hmm.
Is it ever too early to talk about long-term care and estate planning?
So the phrase I've heard is that the best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago. And the next best time to plant a tree is today.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
I can't tell you how many times I've heard people go, "Oh, I wish I'd have done this 5 or 10 years ago." Yeah, sure.
Hindsight's 2020.
If we had future vision and we knew how things were going to go, then yeah, of course, that's what we would do. But that's not planning. That's just, there's something on the list.
That's
we got to take it up. Yeah. And so, yeah, it doesn't work that way. It's worth having the conversation when you feel like you need to have the conversation. It's very useful to have a long-term care payment discussion as part of normal estate planning. And that's a process that can very often involve your financial advisor and the lawyer who's handling your estate planning. And a lot of times, estate planning for that population, for lawyers, is very straightforward. A will, a financial power of attorney, a healthcare decision-making document. Goodbye, see you later. We'll have a little discussion about long-term care as we go. We'll talk about long-term care insurance for 15 seconds. If you want to talk to somebody about long-term care insurance and get quotes, and that's great. But, that you do that because there's a time when you don't need it, but you can talk about it. And then there's the bit where you need it and you can't really talk about it because it's too late.
Right.
Having some version of that conversation is great at any point. I mean, if I'm talking to a couple who just had a child and they're 26 years old and they want to talk about long-term care insurance, I'm going to pump the brakes on them a little bit. But by the same token, the couple in their 80s who have a will that was done in the 1970s and they want to know about long-term care insurance, it's going to be a little difficult.
That's a different conversation.
Carl, can you please share with us the difference between a power of attorney and a living will? I'm sure we could have a whole entire episode on this alone, but I think when people hear the word estate planning, they only think of a will. So can you talk about the difference between those documents?
Well, yeah, sure. So the issue with these things is not getting me to start talking. It's to get me to stop talking. So a power of attorney, in the context we're talking about, deals with financial decision-making. So a financial power of attorney is me saying, I choose this person to make financial decisions on my behalf. There's lots of nuance and detail there, but in a sentence, that's what the document accomplishes. A living will is a healthcare document that deals with healthcare decisions. And there are tons of healthcare decision-making documents, just tons of them. So if somebody's listening and they're like, well, but I have an advance directive, or I have a healthcare power of attorney, or I have a living will, or I have an instruction directive, or a proxy directive, or a 5 wishes document.
Mm-hmm.
It's all kind of more or less in the ballpark of the same thing. They accomplish 2 things. What are my wishes? And who's going to carry out my wishes?
Right.
And so when you talk about those 2 documents, sometimes people will mess up what a will is versus a living will because of the word will being in both of them. Okay, that makes sense. But essentially, those 2 documents just deal with decision-making They just deal with decision making as to those two facets. And you really do need two separate documents because you don't really stick those things in the same document.
What advice can you give for adult children who suddenly find themselves just thrust into a caregiver position?
Deep breaths. It feels like a place to start.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's always useful there. The first thing you look at is these decision-making documents. Are they there?
Say they do have documents, how often should they get reviewed?
So I would say that having somebody look at them, or at least the family looking at them and making sure that they say what they're supposed to say every 5 years is probably appropriate. You have to check your state laws about whether documents are preferred to be of a certain age. In New Jersey, for example, there's a statute that makes it so that it's a lot easier to use a financial power of attorney if it was done less than 10 years ago. So those things you want to look out for. You want to make sure that the people who are listed on there, you still talk to them, or they're still capable of doing the things you want them to do. But that's the sort of thing you want to look for. If you have those things, the next thing you do is just try to get as much organized as you can. Make sure you know what resources you have available. Is there insurance? What money is there? Is the person you're talking to on governmental benefits? Do they get Social Security? Are they getting VA benefits? Are they already on Medicaid? Are they eligible for those things to the best of your knowledge? And come up with a list of questions from there about what things you might need to cover, things that might be important.
Are there any misconceptions out there about elder law and kind of what we do here? I know, our firm is big on Medicaid applications. There's other facets that do that. Are there any misconceptions that we can put to bed here on this podcast?
So I get a lot of people that come in and they say, well, I don't really like lawyers. And I say to them, don't worry, I don't either. I mean, listen, if I had one misconception that I would tell people, that I say in consultation more often than anything else, is if you are in a crisis situation and somebody who is trying to help you, who also coincidentally wants money from you, says a sentence to you and it ends in a period, it doesn't mean it's a fact.
Mm-hmm.
It just means it's something they said. You have to
That's
find
a good point.
Yeah.
You have to find somebody that you trust. And our livelihood is finding people and convincing them that they should trust us to handle only like one of the most important things in their entire life.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, if that sounds difficult, I think it is. And so, but a lot of it is I'm doing the same thing that everybody else is doing, is I'm saying things and the sentences end in periods, and you have to figure out who you trust and what the answers are, because everybody's got their own incentives and their motives, and you just have to make sure you can determine which one's one way versus the other.
It's a great way to put it.
Right. We could do Carl part 2 and go on with all the questions and information. But just to start wrapping up, for our listeners who want to learn more or where to get help, where can they find you or other certified elder law attorneys? Because I do want to make a point. We've been talking about estate planning and elder law, but there is a difference between having a certified elder law attorney versus just someone who has an elder law practice. So if you can just kind of give some information on how to guide the listeners.
Sure. So, for anybody who wants information about our office and the things that we do, we have a presence on Facebook. We have a presence on Instagram if you're into that sort of thing. And we have a website, and we publish content to those platforms regularly. And so, you read it, you might learn something. Obviously, if you needed to talk to somebody, you can call in, and that all works out nicely. But if you're not necessarily looking for somebody not necessarily looking for our office, but you kind of want to know what elder law is, or you're looking for an attorney in your area, I do think it is a good idea to look for someone with a certification in elder law, if that's how you're going to do it. It's indicative of a person who has a great deal of time invested and expertise in the practice area. That certification comes through an organization called the National Elder Law Foundation, which is NELF.org. And on that website, there's a way to search, and you can find certified elder law attorneys near you. And I very regularly speak with other certified elder law attorneys throughout the country to make sure people get what they need. Because, if somebody comes to me and says, well, I have an issue, but, I need an attorney near Topeka, Kansas, I am not licensed in Kansas, and it is unlikely that I will be licensed in Kansas, and so I should probably find you somebody who's already out there doing that job. That's a fantastic resource.
Great.
There's other ways to find attorneys that do similar things, but the NELF website is fantastic for those resources.
Thank you. Because I think that's a big difference to point out, certified elder law versus just in elder law doing this practice. Because like you said, if you're certified, you've gone through training and do more of the things to get the knowledge that you have.
Sure. And there's a lot of people who have a lot of experience in elder law, and they're very good at what they do, and they don't have the certification for one of a variety of different reasons. It doesn't make them bad lawyers. It just means they don't have the certification. But if you're looking for a shortcut, and you want somebody who has spent a bunch of time learning and has taken a very difficult exam and has handled a lot of elder law matters in the years before they were certified and is held to various ethical standards and so on, it's a great shortcut.
Great.
Carl, this has been fantastic. So are there any stories that you can share with us, without obviously sharing any names, of any families that came through the firm in a total crisis situation, and kind of you seeing the work that we do kind of bring them family to a much, much better place?
So I think of a file, this is years ago, we had mom and son came into the office. All right, Dad had cognitive issues. Dad was in bad shape. Dad was acting out. Dad needed to get out of the house right away. And at this point, the office was more or less just me and Lisa. And Mom was in her 80s. Mom's an amazing woman, strong, smart, organized. I think we still have paper clips and staples and rubber bands from this woman and all the things that she organized her paperwork. And they were in a situation where you could tell that family was being ripped apart because because Dad was in a way, Dad was in trouble. But it didn't minimize the fact that they were both exceptional people in an excruciatingly difficult situation. And, Lisa and I worked really hard on that file to get them to the point where Dad was on Medicaid. Mom got to keep her house. Mom, again, in her 80s, mom's well into her 90s now, and she's as sharp as she's ever been. Drives a Chrysler far faster than any woman that age has any business driving it. And, she's living in her house and she's got her own affairs in order, and she's got her own life in order, and she knows exactly what she wants, and she's able to run the rest of her life. And she got to spend some time with her husband as wife. and her son got to spend time as his son, because we got the stupid stuff out of the way. We got the how do you deal with the behavioral stuff out of the way, and the Medicaid and the assisted living, and how do you fight with all of those things. So we got those things out of the way, and we let them be family, and we brought that family. We had a role in knitting that family back together.
What a gift.
And and so years later,
Goosebumps.
years later, we will sit back and go, this is the reason we do what we do. And I wish it happened more often. We can all talk about the ones we like. Maybe after the microphones turn off, we could talk about some of the other ones. But, when you have days like that, you go, man, I think I'm doing the right thing. And that's why we do this, is that we help to knit that family back together. And they're still there, and we still talk to them. And, God bless that family, because it's their strength was what allowed us to go in and fortify them.
Carl, this has been fantastic.
Yes, thank you for
so
sharing.
much. And thank you for, allowing Mary and I to start this podcast for the firm to really be able to bring this sort of education and knowledge to people that really, truly need it. You're doing a great job at what you do. You're doing fantastic work. And, it's a pleasure for Mary and I to be a part of your firm.
Absolutely.
I'm happy to have the opportunity to speak with you guys and to crack a few jokes at everybody's expense. So I certainly appreciate it.
All right. If you found this episode helpful, please be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone that could benefit.
Just remember, you don't have to navigate aging or caregiving alone.
If today's conversation raised questions about elder law, long-term care, or planning ahead, visit jerseyelderlaw.com or call 609-842-9200 to find resources and support.
This is for mature audiences only, presented by Archer Law Office. Until next time, keep pushing forward and keep the conversation going.